I love this episode. It's making me put my tinfoil hat on. It's making me put my BMT hat on. It's psychedelic. It's metaphysical. It's inspiring. It's episode 839 with Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell. And when these two get together and put on these wigs and these ridiculous costumes, amazing stuff happens. Not to mention they get super high and drunk. But in this clip, they're about to talk about what happens to humans as they start to get exposed to different conditions. And this made me really think about, and what they mention is, when we get into space. And just that, along with AI that's constantly pushing forward currently, and ChatGPT, it really makes you think, what is possible for human beings? What are we going to change into? Let's get into it. Coach Colin, coolest high performance coach in the world. Hit that subscribe button. Let's go.
Fucking adorable.
They're so
creature.
Adorable. Is there a video of an orangutan eating a slow loris?
Look right there,
It's
bro.
filmed, yeah. So
Borneo orangutan filmed eating a slow loris. Oh, dude, that's rough. There is something really rough about that Attenborough documentary where chimps, they have this kind of elaborate scheme of capturing monkeys.
Hunting.
And then they capture them, they're eating them alive.
Hunting parties.
That footage he got there's one image where you see the monkey screaming and the chimp is like eating its hips off.
Yeah.
And it's like chewing its lower half
Horrible.
off while it's holding on to it. And you're like, yo, that's us. That's us. That's us. That's our people. That's our people if you go back as far as you can to the fork in the road where we all separated.
That's
How
right.
the fuck did we get here? And they're still there.
Right.
How the fuck? How the fuck are we that far ahead?
Oh, man.
Oh, it's so horrible, dude.
This has been like a parade of nightmares today.
the way they do it. And David Attenborough is just like
He's like,
I don't think they really knew that chimpanzees did this to monkeys.
what if they were just showing off for David Attenborough?
I don't know.
They're like, let's freak that guy out.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. Yeah, maybe.
Duncan.
It's just the idea of a super intelligent version of a chimpanzee being next to a chimpanzee, and then a super intelligent version of that being next to that, and that there's this like gradual progression from being something like a hair-covered primitive primate to being an alien. And there's a natural course of progression.
Right.
And every fucking planet where life forms is this how it goes. Single cell, multi-cell, figure it out, use your thumbs, next you know, make your nuclear energy, boom.
This is Tim Leary's circuits of consciousness. This was his theory. Is like just what you said, we go into space eventually, and once you go into space, your DNA is going to change, and this will lead you to the next level of humanity. But for that to happen, we have to go into zero gravity. We have to go into space first, and that causes a shift in consciousness, not just for the individuals in space, but for the entire planet. Like, planetary civilization changes whenever it's like even one member makes its way into space, like, because now we all know it's possible. And then theoretically, like, when Musk finally has that Mars colony, that's going to be the next big shift. Like, there's no telling what early Martian settlers are gonna like turn into. You know what I mean? Like, there's no telling. Like, and I bet we've talked about it on the podcast now at least 40 times, but it's worth bringing up again. Those mutating pigs, right? They get out of the enclosure, they mutate. So
all pigs.
What happens when we get to fucking Mars?
Right.
And the same thing starts happening. We
flies.
assumed we were going to stay human, but all of a sudden people are waking up with like an eye on their wrist, or like, you know what I mean? Like some like their nipples are gone. Something's shifting just because that's what humans do when they're on Mars. On Mars, you change form. You turn into like a caterpillar or some like blob. You know, but we just didn't know that because we forgot we could even do that. It used to be a thing. People would be like, don't land on Mars, because we mutate on Mars in something like embarrassing.
Have you ever seen any documentaries on the Dogon people?
Yeah.
Yeah, their history is that, you know, when they tell their oral history, they came from Mars.
Elon Musk is a Dogon person. That's what that tells me. But that was the clip. And it's so true. The thing that he brings up about the pigs, that's the thing that triggered my brain, right? Because it's like those pigs, what he's talking about is like when pigs, let's say you got a pig on a farm, and let's say you release that pig out into the wild, that pig its snout will get bigger. It'll start to grow hair, like, pigs to be pretty much hairless. It'll start to grow like dark brown hair, brown and black hair. And I think even it'll start forming tusks, I think. But either way, and then it gets really aggressive as well. Like, it changes completely. And that's what happens when you let it out. Even in human beings, if you've ever, like, I've had friends that have done long stints in jail. And when they come out, they're so different. So different. And that's just been by being kept inside of something. They get, people have seen it. Maybe you even know someone that went to jail. They get bigger. They get stronger. They get harder. They get meaner. They turn into a different person. They might even be more violent. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just from being put inside something. So what does happen to human beings when we all of a sudden get released into space, like Duncan said? And what he's talking about when it comes to Timothy Leary's 8 circuits of consciousness, Timothy Leary was talking about just that. He said he also talks about, Timothy Leary, he talks about ways to trigger these different states of consciousness, because he was really into psychedelics and different drugs. So he talks about activating these certain levels of consciousness through psychedelic use. And then that also makes sense to me because, like, I have done something called a hero dose. If you don't know, in regards to psilocybin, a hero dose is when you take like 5 grams of psilocybin or mushrooms. And, I usually would stay in the realm of like 7 grams. And when I meet somebody else who has done that, I can tell. Like, there's almost like a kinship. You can just tell. Like, to bring it up because, like, you can tell that they've done that. You can tell they've had that experience. And it's weird. It's like you're connected in this odd way. And you can't explain it. And it's because we've been exposed to something that the rest of the people haven't been exposed to. It's like you can just see it. When somebody hasn't done drugs at all, you can tell. When somebody's done really hard drugs, they've been exposed to some really hard stuff, you can tell. So, like, what happens when we go out into space, right? And not just like, in a ship, just like rotating around the planet, not orbiting around the planet. Not just that. Like you said, like, what happens when we go to another planet and stay there? Like, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, our heads got a little bigger because, Mars, it's like, it's a weird thing, like, I don't know, like, your heads just get a little bigger and our eyes got a little bigger. Like, I don't know. It's just a thing that happens. It's like your DNA actually will change. And this is also what Timothy Leary talked about. Like, your DNA will actually change. And that makes so much sense because they do say, I don't know if you ever heard, you should look it up, but they do say, like, your DNA is more activated as you travel. Like, every time you travel to a place, like, you go onto a plane and you go to this other place and you're immersed in this other culture, like, you change, you come back so different. That's why if you've ever talked to somebody who's like traveled the world, they seem different because they've been exposed to so many different cultures. And they've had to navigate through understanding how these people communicate and what's offensive and what's not offensive. Then over here, what's offensive, not offensive. And they just come back very different. I don't know if you've ever had a friend that's like traveled, Asia or something, and then they come back. They just come back a little different. And it seems like, oh, well, you just had a great experience, you were on a vacation, but is that it? Is that all it is? Or has he actually changed inside, like DNA wise? I don't know. It's weird. Like, when I look at a big, vast forest, like if I go to a place I've never been and I look at a huge space of greenery, let's say like New Zealand, you look at all the green, it's like something different happens inside of me because I grew up in the city. You never see that. You never see huge, abundant green. You never see that. So what happens when you're outside of the planet and you look at the planet and all of a sudden it's like, you get a new exposure. You know? I don't know. Like I think we all know that every experience changes a human being. But these experiences that we're talking about, somebody getting implanted with Neuralink, somebody who gets Neuralink in their head and then also, has Chat GPT routed inside of their brain, like what happens to that person? They're going to be so different. It's going to be crazy. And would their DNA change because of the technology that's been put inside of them? That's the question. That's a big question. Like, would you change genetically after long enough? Like, obviously it wouldn't happen right away, but would you change genetically? And how much so? And would you be able to pass on what's happened in your brain from the technology that's giving you like all these answers? Like, would you be able to pass any of that on? You wouldn't be able to pass the tech on like you could in terms of like, okay, put it in the kid's head. Yeah, I want him to have the same thing as me. I want to be linked. Like, you could do that, but in a genetic sense, like you don't put anything into that kid. Are you going to pass anything on? All your rampant intelligence that you're now gifted with? Somebody goes to Mars, lives on Mars for 40 years, comes back, gives birth to a kid on Earth. Is that kid now different? Like if you ended up being different, you had a different bone density because you're in a different gravity. Like, it just makes me think so much about what's possible in this whole, like Duncan said, an eye all of a sudden pops up on your wrist. Like, does that happen? Would that happen? Could that happen? Do we change that much? Because like you said to the pig, right? Not to compare people to pigs, but why not? We're in this conversation. So it's like, what happens to us when we go to a different planet? Like if I go to jail for 10 years, I'm coming out different. My face is going to look different. Great in comparison. Have you ever seen people who've gone to war? You ever look that up? There's these pictures of guys and it's like before war and after war. And it's like their eyes are more sunken in. Some of them look like they have darker eyes than they did before. Their faces are different. Like they look different. And again, that's going through an experience when we're on our planet. What happens when you go through intergalactic war and you come back? I don't know, man. But this episode's making me think. And I don't even smoke weed. I love it. This is like my drug now. Some Duncan Trussell and Joe Rogan. But anyway, I'm out.